Greetings, YouTube people that are watching this. Deconverted Man here. So I wanted to talk about an idea that's come up every now and again with epistemology and is reality real? Because I recently was told about the Cartesian skepticism, and I hadn't heard that, or maybe I had and forgot it. And it's a system of epistemology that asks, what can we know, and can we know things, just like, a lot of epistemologies do, essentially. And this comes from Rene Descartes and others, and there's various different ways to view it. But rather than cover all that, because it's a tough one to really wrap my head around per se, and I'm not sure I've got it exactly, I thought, well, I can talk about my epistemology a bit, which I've done before, but I wanted to frame that in a different way. And one way I've thought of is with the error checking, the program error checking paradox. And the idea is you have a program that's supposed to check your program that you've written, your code, for errors. And it reports there's an error in your code. You look over your code and you don't find any errors. So you think, well, maybe the program, the error checking program, is itself flawed. So how could you find out? Well, if you ran it on its own self, if you ran the program on the program, then it should report no errors. But what if it reported no errors because there's an error in the program? Then you would never know. So the positive value gives you no new information. So if you run the program on itself and it reports no errors, that doesn't tell you anything. It could still have an error and you wouldn't know. But if you run the program on itself and it says there is an error, then you know that there's something wrong with the program. And you might say, well, wait a minute, but if there's an error in the program and it says there's an error in the program, then how do I know it's working? Well, even if it's not working, the fact that it said that there's an error, if there's no errors, well, actually, that can't be possible. There is an error because it cannot give you a false return in this case. So in this case, it's not a true paradox, because if it says there's an error and there in the code there is no error, then there is something somewhere that's went wrong because it's telling you there's an error when there isn't. So so there is a way to get some information out of it in that sense. And so we say, well, can I know reality is real? And you say, well, you go through all this, well, maybe not. It's like, well, you don't have anything that says reality isn't real. You don't have the indication of the no answer. You're getting the positive result of, yes, reality checks out to be real from the error reporting program. And so that doesn't give you any new information. Ultimately, we are always going to be trapped in our own sensory inputs inside our brain to some extent. We can't step outside of ourselves to be objective about ourselves. We have to rely on others to tell us that something is going wrong up here, or something's going wrong with our senses a lot of the time. Sometimes you just don't know, and that's pretty scary. But you know at least enough to know that you're surviving. And so you're perceiving reality well enough to survive. And one of the complaints from apologists or theists is that, well, that doesn't necessarily tell you the truth, and I disagree, because it tells you enough of the truth to let you survive. So if something is charging your way, whether it's a car or a tiger, getting out of the way, or it might be a good idea. And maybe your senses are so far off that you see a tiger when it's a car, or see a car when it's a tiger. But if they allow you to survive, then they're working well enough. And I think that if the car starts climbing a tree, then you probably would know at that point that something's off. And if you survive that situation, you might want to get checked out for that. So I think that with the doubt of reality, if you will, that running that scenario once has maybe a use of establishing what an axiom must be, that reality is real. That has to be the base axiom, at least for me it does. For others, they have different ideas about that. It's like, well, we can't really know what that is to some degree or whatever. And it's like, well, maybe, but we can know it well enough. And that's probably the best, that's the best we're going to do. And so if we ran this error program on reality, it would say, nah, there's nothing wrong with it. This is reality. But if we run it and it says, oh, there's an error, then we know something is wrong. And so far as it said that. So there's no indication that we are a brain in the vat, or that, this is the Truman Show, or that we're in the Matrix, or that there's an evil demon tricking us into thinking that this is reality, or any of these other scenarios that can come up. There's nothing to show that that is the case. So there's no reason to believe that. Error, no reality detected. Right. Yeah. That would mean something is wrong somewhere. If you got that message as a response there, Nerdy wrote it. So epistemology, the framework of it is important. I think, well, from my skeptical stance of knowing my own epistemology and understanding it and trying to communicate it, because I run into it every now and again. I had a conversation with a theist, and it's like, well, we all have assumptions at some level. It's like, well, ultimately, yes, there is something that's an axiom at some level, and that's at least reality, which hopefully we can agree upon, which is where I think the joke of the lobster came in at some point, where I was like, well, at least we can agree that lobsters are real, right? And if you say no, well, then I don't even know how to have a conversation with you anymore, because it's like, we can't even agree on that basic thing, then we're done for. We can't move forward, because we can't even say, if we can't say that reality is real, then we're not talking. And if you're using that as some sort of defense to say, well, you can't know reality is real, and you go, okay, well, maybe that's the case. How does that help you with your God claim? Well, we can't know that God's real either, so might as well believe it is. It's like, no, actually, that seems more like a reason to be a skeptic and say, well, if we can't know reality is real, then we can't know diddly squat, so we should be skeptical of everything then. It doesn't mean that we should believe everything then. I think that certainly leads to absurdities. In fact, believing in everything leads to all sorts of contradictions. And then that's the, I think it's called the truism philosophy, where everything is true. Even things you say, well, but truism is false. Yes, that's true. It's like, what? It's absurd. So let's say, one theist claim could be, well, we have about 33% of the world that agrees with the Christian viewpoint. Maybe 33 some odd percent of the world agrees with the Muslim viewpoint. And maybe it's 22-ish, 33, maybe it's 33-ish, I don't know, maybe a little bit less is the Jewish position. So we've got at least like 99% of the world that's on our side to some degree. We're not quite there, but we all kind of have the same God. So you 0.1% of the world, or whatever, because I can't do percentages, you guys are perceiving the world the wrong way. Okay, well, we agree that we might be perceiving the world wrong. But we all do hopefully agree that we're perceiving it well enough to survive. then the question becomes, how do we identify if we're perceiving the world incorrectly or correctly? So we say, well, your difference of opinions on all these matters, you're saying we're willing to set that aside just so that we can say, well, we all have at least a God and you guys don't, so you're wrong. You're not perceiving God. Okay, well, what's God? What do you mean by that? Have you all agreed on that yet? Well, let's just say they said yes. They didn't, but let's say they said yes. Okay, great. Let's say it was the entire world except for you. I like that scenario even better because it's the ultimate appeal to majority. The entire world except for you all perceives this thing and you don't. And they're trying to convince you that your perceptions are off, and they might very well be. What would be the thing that they could do to show you that it's you that's flawed rather than it's them that's flawed? Seems that we would need something other than mere perception to enable us to have that conversation. And so that moves beyond pure observational ability to a realm of testability. And you, again, could run into the error checking program paradox where you say, well, what if the test itself is flawed? We can't use the test on itself because the test on itself will just say that the test is working. If it says it's not working, then that's one thing, but it's just going to say it works, and we're not going to learn anything more from that. So now what? How do we know that testing is a good idea? Well, let's try it and see if we can get any results from it. And if we get any results at all that work, then that seems to suggest that the test works. The formula works. So you might run into this with mathematical things. People will say, well, how do you know? You can't prove 1 + 1 is 2. Like, well, what do you mean? The fact that it works every time seems to prove that the system is working. If you ever show that mathematics, that plus or minus or divide or multiply or any of those things didn't work, then, well, it's usually because you put in the wrong numbers or something. You did the math wrong. It's not that the square root, the idea of what the square root does in and of itself is somehow broken. If you could show that, that would be amazing. And that would, I don't know what that would do to math, but it would change things. But you have the burden to show that because it seemed every other time it's worked. So the proof that it works is that it works. And it's like, well, that's circular. Well, it's an axiom at that point. It's not about circular or not circular at that point. And if you're going to say, well, it's circular, great, then we're using the system of logic. So we're back to the method of what logical argument do we have for this idea? Show me that I'm wrong, because I might be. I'm willing to be wrong because that means I learned something. I have nothing to lose in being wrong. If it turns out that the Judeo-Christian God is the real God, then I learned something new by finding out that that's true. What I do with that knowledge is a different question. But at least I know something that I didn't know before. But the level of evidence is always, for me at least, the same level for any claim, whatever that claim is. Now, for more extraordinary claims, then you might say, well, I want more evidence for that, and that makes sense. And, well, how do we determine what is a more extraordinary claim? And I'd say, well, anything that's not mundane. Well, what's mundane? Ordinary, everyday things. Or, well, what's that mean? And it's like, well, unless you're going throughout life and always seeing ghosts everywhere, like in the Sixth Sense or something, then that's not a, but then you're the only one doing that. If everyone was doing it, except for the one person, then there would be some way to verify that they're seeing these dead people. Like, okay, let's put you in one room and put the other guy in a different room, and they'll have the, one-way mirrors. They'll look at the same room and they'll say whether or not there's a dead person in there that I can't see, and then they'll write it down and describe it, of what that person looks like and sounds like or whatever. And if the two match, then that means something. As long we made sure that we do something to double blindness or whatever, because they could have conferred with each other beforehand or something. But then we do it again with a different room. Maybe we move them to another room, and that way we can make sure that they didn't prepare this in time. And okay, is there a dead person in this room? So if one says yes, the other says no. That's it. That's the end of it. We know that it's not real. So that test would be something that those external to me would have to show me to say, okay, that I see. Okay, that shows me that I'm wrong. So we have the error checking program that says everything's fine, and you go, well, I looked at my code, and my code looks fine, but maybe it's not. That's the methodology of science, is where you send that to somebody else. You go, what do you think? Is this broken? By the way, I'm using this error checking program as well. Is that broken? Somebody look at the code of that and tell me if that's working or not. And so they try to find the flaws in the idea. They try to disprove the idea. What would disprove this idea? What would falsify that everyone is seeing ghosts, or that everyone is experiencing the same sort of God, or whatever the claim is? And if we can't apply that methodology to it, then what methodology can we apply? Because just sensory input on its own, we've already kind of agreed, is insufficient. It might be sufficient enough to allow us to survive, but is it sufficient enough to say that what I'm perceiving is in fact what's going on? How do I know? As somebody that is blind, how do they know that there's anything in the world to see at all? Well, they can feel stuff. Okay, great. But then it's equivalent to it being a tree anyways. There's no real difference at that point. Because if everyone's telling them the same thing and no one's disagreeing about it, then is everyone wrong? They could be. Is everyone lying? They could be, but then it's probably close to reality anyways. Now, it might not be, but it's close. And there might be some tests that we can do that additionally show that this thing is a tree, that would compel the blind person to think that, yes, it is in fact a tree. And that test might be hard to come up with, but I think we could figure something out. Everyone's having their little comments. I'll get to that in a moment. So what is it that your skepticism, or whatever you want to call it, how does it work? That, I think, is important for you to develop and to try to frame, so that when these sort of things come up, and they will come up, we can't prove anything without it being a circular thing anyway, so then what? It's like, well, maybe. And if that's the case, then we should doubt everything. Because we certainly can't believe everything. Well, no, we can't believe everything, but I want you to believe what I believe. Why? I see the opposite a lot of times on various, on YouTube. I've seen Twitter, on Facebook. I've seen it, heard it. What does it matter to you that I believe something that's not true? Why do you care? Well, you're assuming I care, but it's an interesting question. But You guys seem to care a lot when I don't believe what you believe. So why do you care? I mean, it's kind of it's like, well, who cares why we care or don't care? I mean, what's the point of that? Well, I think that it's trying to figure out, I see the world in this way. Why do you see the world in that way? And why should you care why I see the world in this way? If I'm wrong, let me be wrong. So what? What's it matter to you? Well, because you affect me. Well, but I'm way over here. Well, that you still affect me. You still affect those around you. And those people affect others. And that's your tiny pebble dropped in the pond, it's gonna ripple outwards. It might be almost unnoticeable or completely unnoticeable, but it affects something at some level. And so it matters. Doesn't it matter if you know what's real or not real, or true or not true? Why wouldn't that matter to you? That you don't believe something that's true, or that you believe something that's not true, or what have you. That's one person talking about biological evolution. You can't make me believe that it's true. That's correct. We can't. All we can do is show you the evidence and explain it as best as we can and let you decide. But it seems that you are rejecting that the evidence is even evidence. We don't really know what to do now. And they're just crossing their arms saying, well, what's it matter if I don't believe in it? Well, because you're talking about it being not true suggests that it's not true, and you're not supporting that with any sort of coherent argument or facts or anything. And so that could cause somebody else to agree with you, and that person also has an issue of gullibility that we are worried about, and we want, hypothetically, to help them too. And it might be that you affect nobody. That might be the case. It might be keep your beliefs to yourself, but you're still affecting yourself. So you can't escape that your beliefs or lack of beliefs will affect somebody at some level, somewhere, somehow, somewhen, and you might have no idea what that is, what your impact will be, or even if you have one. Recently, some sad news has come about that this very prominent figure on YouTube has passed away, has died. And I don't know the individual well enough to really comment on it, to say, well, kind words, or what can I say? I don't know the person. And as a skeptic, I don't believe in an afterlife, but there could be something. Even without a God, there could be a thing afterwards. It just depends what reality happens to be. But that doesn't help us, because even if that person is somewhere else, that doesn't help us. They're gone from our perspective. And what we do with that and how we carry their legacy onwards matters. So certainly what that person shared about their beliefs with us matters now. So if they had something that was a false belief, and we carry that forward in order to honor their legacy, then that becomes a problem for everyone else. Whereas if they had true ideas and we carry that forward in order to honor their legacy, then that helps everyone else. I don't know if that would be useful to say about this particular person, but it came to mind. I know somebody's going to be like, what person are you talking about? So now I have to make sure I know what I'm talking about. Let's see. What was it? I just got it. Sci Strike is the avatar name of this particular individual. I did not know them, so it's mortality. I don't know what to say more than that. It's sad. It's sad for us, but all we can do is carry that legacy that they left behind forward, and if they had things that were wrong, we'll put this to the side. We'll just carry what was right forward, and we'll carry the best ideas and the best times forward. And I think that's a pretty good legacy for anyone to leave behind, is that their ideas or their kindness affected you in some way. Of course, nobody will remember me when I'm gone, but that's, Anyways, I had to lighten the mood a bit. I'm sorry. Let me read chat. I know that's a horrible transition. I'm sorry. I got it. Let's talk about death. No, let's read chat. Here. There. Okay, now we've got a transition. I'm gonna get so many dislikes because of this. Andrew says several religions have one all-powerful God. Only one can be right at most, so the religions would have to be wrong. Well, yeah, I mean, ultimately, only one claim would land precisely on the exact thing, but their methodology, if it's pure guesswork, they have to guess, right by absolute accident. Now, maybe that matters, or maybe it doesn't. It only matters if the God says it matters. You have some weird God thing or cosmic entity, powerful being, whatever, that cares what people believe and cares about it to a precision level of, you have to believe X, Y, and Z, and Z, by the way, has to be capitalized and on its side to the left. And if you don't believe that, then you're screwed. And that happens to actually be true. Well, that's great, but why that being cared in the first place, who knows? It doesn't sound like a being of that much intelligence. It sounds rather petty to me. But regardless, if that happens to be how it is, well, and you happen to get it right, but what was your methodology? Just blindly throwing a dart at a wall, not even knowing if you have a dart or if there's a dart board? Computer says, keep calm and carry on. Gary has the one true dog. Yeah. Believe what I believe in. Give me your pretty daughters free food and drink. And you'll get a nice place after your death. Yeah, right. Anyone can make any claim, and we know that. We know people can lie, so there's a good reason to be a skeptic right there. Sunk cost fallacy, right? And if you've put a lot of time and effort and energy into your belief system, whatever it is, it's awfully hard to get out of it. Now, I believed in Christianity for a lot, from age of 8 to the age of 32. So whatever that is, I can't do math. So however many years that is, I'm not going to do the math. You do the math. I don't care. So there's a lot of time. Some people have had more time. Some people have less. Some people have always not believed or whatever. And it's like, well, what would it take to convince you that you're wrong? You have a Herculean task ahead of you, because you have to find the archaeology to show that this stuff happened. And when I looked, I didn't find anything. So you look and you tell me what you find, and we'll go from there. What's interesting about that is I rarely get any answer. You got to leave a legacy, hopefully. And Andrew's spelling and grammar errors disprove the goddess of grammar and spelling. No, it just means that you're a poor adherent to the goddess of spelling and grammar. As am I. I blaspheme that goddess every moment that I can. Even when I don't care. So that's kind of the problem. So thank you all for the chats and the ideas and the comments and questions and whatever you might have for me after this hangout is no longer, or hangout. It's not even a hangout. I don't know what this is. This live stream is done of, and you know, I don't know. So is reality real? Yeah. I mean, the error checking program said so that didn't tell me it wasn't real, so that's something. Hopefully this got you to think about epistemology or your own system of skepticism, or if you should even use the word skeptic. I know some people take that, and I love this rap song that's out there by Ruckus Ali, History of Philosophy. And he goes through, and part of the lyrics talk about skeptics, and you know, who say don't believe anything. Well, that's not what I mean by skeptic, so it doesn't count. So, yeah, eat that, Rucka Ali. But he says, you know, reason, that's the core that we need to have, is reason. And I'm like, yeah, that's what it means to be a skeptic to me, is use reason. And what is reason? Logic, science. It's trying to integrate all these things together to have some sort of coherence. Whether or not we're ever going to have it, I think we're getting close, but could be wrong. But you have to prove that we're wrong. And so far, no one's done that. So that's good, I think. But unless and until we have a valid and sound argument, empirical evidence, or repeatable tests, I think that we should be skeptical of the conclusions. Yeah, that's a good thing. Okay. In your dreams, you behave well. Okay. Make your dreams good ones if you can. Usually you can't control dreams. I'm going to end this stream now. Good night. Good day. Where's the button?